So this is something that's been kind of brewing around in my mind for a little while. I've noticed on a lot of the Land Rover forums, on the internet, on Facebook and so forth, you regularly get, what can I tow with Series Land Rover? And it's a really, really difficult question. There's a lot of different things to consider. I'm not going to get into your licensing and things like that, although it does have a bit of an impact, and there's certainly some confusion has been caused by that. But in terms of the actual vehicles and trailers, and it's understanding the way the law works. Now I'll make another point here. I'm in the UK, I'm talking about the UK rules and regs, where if you're abroad, Australia, Europe, whatever, you may well have other regulations. Some European countries do seem to have simply plated Land Rovers at whatever they wanted without any apparent reference to factory literature. But there are a few points that I think do need raising. I can't speak for Series 1s because I'm not a Series 1 man. Any questions there, I would say speak to the Series 1 club. But as far as Series 2s, 2As, 3s go, we've got a few points that kind of need to be made. First of all, in the sort of 50s, 60s, when the Series 2 was launched, Land Rover was not obligated to provide very much detail of what a Land Rover would tow. I think the general consensus at the time seems to have been, as long as the vehicle seems to be driving okay, then it's fine. As time went on, Land Rover obviously came under pressure to actually give some more definite figures for what you would tow. We went away from the kind of idea of we just use your common sense, although even in 2019 I think common sense is somewhat lacking. But I think it was early 1969, there was a workshop bulletin released which did list towing weights for Series Land Rovers. And to make a clear point, this was not recommended or anything like that. They were saying this is what they will tow. So we got at that point, they said an unbraked trailer, 500 kilos, a braked, an over unbraked trailer, 2,000 kilo, 2 tons if you like. And then for a coupled trailer, you had either 3.5 tons for a diesel vehicle, or you had 4 tons for a petrol. The forward controls seem to have possibly had slightly lower weights, probably because the sheer weight of the actual towing vehicle itself. But when you bear in mind most Series Land Rovers are top in the scales, only about 1.5 tons. I mean, an 88-inch in standard form is about 1.5 tons. A 109 is about 1,700 kilos, 1,750 kilos. Really, common sense would tell you 3.5 tons on overrun brakes is probably not that good an idea. I mean, we all know that Land Rovers, they're not, I mean, I'm not saying they're sort of dangerous on the road or anything, but the brakes are certainly not up to modern standards. So we got that bulletin in 1969. There was nothing on the vehicle that actually said what the towing weight was. In fact, I'll just show you the build plate on here. I hope that you can get that. All it gives me is transfer gears, my chassis number, and information about how to change between on the transfer box. There's nothing on this vehicle that says I can tow whatever. So at this point, you look at the manual. So the handbooks, the workshop bulletins, etc. They were giving us these figures: this 500 kilos, 2 ton, and then your coupled trailer weights. I mean, as far as coupled trailers go, very few of us are going to have that. Very few vehicles were ever set up for it. A few of the electricity board vehicles, but this one may have had it at the time. It certainly doesn't now. But they did. Some of them did have an air braking system. But generally speaking, you're not going to have that. So you're talking about an unbraked trailer and an over unbraked trailer, which for a series is limiting you to 2 tons as a gross trailer weight. you get people saying, well, the law says you can tow 750 kilos on an unbraked trailer. Yes, it does. That's the maximum that you can tow on the road with an unbraked trailer. That doesn't mean that you can just hitch that up to whatever vehicle you want and tow it. Many cars will have a much lower unbraked towing capacity. Even today, you know, a lot of these small cars can probably only tow 250 kilos, potentially even less. I mean, there are cars out there that cannot tow a trailer. The manufacturers are, no, this vehicle cannot tow a trailer. One that springs to mind is a Ford car. Whether the newer ones can tow or not, I don't know. But certainly the older ones, you could not legally tow a trailer behind them. So what we kind of got is the law states that you can have a trailer of a given braking type up to a given weight. So you can have an unbraked trailer up to 750 kilos. You can then, from 750 to 3,500, you can go on over run brakes. Beyond 3,500 kilos in the UK, it's a couple of brake job. It's air brakes, it's truck brakes, that kind of thing. They do exist for Land Rovers. I've seen them on Defenders, for example. The Defenders that work at Stonehenge, they're set up to tow 4 tons. So you've got those are the legal maximums. So the law says you can have that. Of course, that doesn't mean, as I said before, that you can just hitch that up to whatever you want. So if we're talking about an unbraked trailer or an over or whatever type of trailer, actually, you look to your manual. Now, there is a point, okay, Land Rover didn't put that information out there in the sort of, early 60s. They weren't obligated to, they weren't required to, so they didn't do it. We do know that they then, as I related before, in early 1969, we got this document. Now, there are, I think, other documents out there that are slightly older, which give those same weights. So that seems to be where we're at. So far as a Series 2 or a 2A is concerned, it's 500, 2 tons. Above 2 tons is copper brakes. Of course, you've got the what a lot of people tend to think is because the Defender will tow 750 unbraked, 3.5 ton on over unbrakes, and then 4 ton with coupled brakes. They assume it goes all the way down the ridge. You're going to think coilers right from the start. You've got disc brakes on there. You've got brake servos. There's a lot more kit on there. They were also heavier vehicles. Tyre technology had moved on, so Land Rover were able to increase those towing capacities. And in the case of it, like a Discovery or a Defender, they match quite nicely with the legal maximums. So a Defender's really nice, but everything else, that's not the case. One issue we do get is Series 3s with VIN plates. For some reason, people seem to think that a vehicle with a VIN plate all of a sudden can tow 3.5 or 4 tons. That's not what a VIN plate is saying. What a VIN plate gives is you've got your build number, your SALL, whatever. You've then got your axle weights, so the maximum axle weights of the vehicle, front and rear, the gross weight of the vehicle, and then your train weight. Well, the train weight never changed. All the VIN plate is saying is this vehicle can tow 3.5 or 4 tons, depending on the engine, which is correct. That's entirely correct, going right back to an original Series 2 back in 1958, as far as I can establish. The VIN doesn't allow you to ignore the braking requirements. That's the problem. So a VIN is quite correct in saying, like, this vehicle is a petrol engine Series 2A. I could tow 4 tons behind this vehicle with coupled brakes. That's the crux of it. On overrun brakes, I'm still limited to 2 tons. On no brakes, I'm 500 kilos because that's what's in the manual. Those manuals never change. If you check a late Series 3 manual, even when it's got V8s in there and all of that information, those limits are still in. So even a stage 1 V8 legally speaking, you could not tow 3.5 tons on over and brakes behind a stage 1 V8. When Land Rover brought out the 110 and the 90, they had a disc brake from axle, servos, etc., etc. So those weights were upgraded. Likewise with the Range Rover, I think the early Range Rovers were limited to a 2-ton over and braking capacity, which was then uprated, I think again early 80s. I think, was this because the Range Rover got a disc brake rear axle? I'm not a Range Rover man, so I'm not quite sure what the technical changes were. I mean, I think it's important. Some of you might well be reading this and saying, yeah, whatever, Dan, don't care, you're wrong, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, that's your lookout. I mean, personally, I ran a towing business. I looked into this in quite some detail. I'm pretty certain what I'm saying is correct. Certainly, I think it's important to understand this, that obviously you take your risk, you make your choice. I can't tell you what you may or may not do. That's entirely up to you. It's the same as that speed limits. If you want to speed, you can speed. You can't really complain, if you get caught. And likewise with towing, I think realistically what we've had is, for a very, very long time, this stuff was never enforced. It wasn't an issue. Most people, they weren't towing 3.5-4 tons behind a Land Rover anyway. Trailer technology's moved on. They've got bigger, they've got heavier, they've got, they can carry more and more weight. But they weren't an issue back in the 60s. And generally, I think it was taken, as long as it didn't look absurdly heavy, it was fine. Even today, that's probably valid to an extent. If your trailer doesn't look massive and your vehicle's not crawling along at 5 miles an hour because it's so overweight, are VOSA going to be interested? Possibly not. I think it's important to understand what would happen if they decided they were going to prosecute you. People have contacted VOSA, and I've seen the sort of correspondence back and forth between them and VOSA. VOSA are saying they would be going on the weight limits as posted in the handbook as, at very least, the guidance. I mean, VOSA, the way VOSA tend to word things, and I've spoken to them about other subjects, not really with towing weights, but things like O licenses and things like that. They tend to give an answer and then they'll say, this is not law, this is VOSA's position, which is quite interesting because it's VOSA that are going to prosecute you. Potentially, or it could be the police, and they might then pass it on. But they certainly, there's text out there which I will link to, where VOSA are saying, well, I've done a quick Google and looked for Series 1, 2, 3 technical manuals, and these are the weights I'm getting, and it's the 500 2-ton, and then you 3.5 or 4 for the couple of brakes. So that's what they're going to use. You got to look at it from a scenario point of view. We haven't as yet had the case that the case law, as far as I'm aware of anyway. If we have, it's not been published or not publicised. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Someone has a Series Land-Rover, puts 3.5 ton on an over-on brake trailer on the back. There's an accident. Someone is maimed, severely injured, killed. There's an investigation. They might say, well, hang on a minute, 3.5 tons behind this vehicle. Is this right? What are they going to do? They're going to then look online for some kind of guidance as to what these vehicles could tow. They're going to turn up the owner's manuals. They're going to turn up the workshop bulletins. They're going to turn up the threads on the forums where this has all been discussed. And they're going to kind of say, well, the onus was on you as the driver to establish what the weights were. I mean, this is ultimately the where the buck stops, is with you as the driver. You're responsible for the vehicle in terms of everything working, it being roadworthy, within its weights, etc., etc. That applies as much to a car driver, van driver, as it does to a truck driver, a bus driver, or whatever else. So that's the way and this is what they've said, that's the route they would take in the event of a prosecution. So whilst I cannot obviously demand that anyone does anything, what all I can say is that's information that's out there, that for every leaf sprung, or certain, I'm not talking about, I can't talk about Series 1s, I can't talk about things like 101s, which come that they're a bit different, but so far as a regular Series 2 to A3 is concerned, there's ample information out there that your weight limits are, and I'm not, I'm repeating myself, but let's drive the point home. The weights are 500 kilos for on overrun brakes, 2 ton. I'm confusing myself. 500 kilos on no brakes, 2 tons on overrun brakes, 3.5 tons, couple of brakes on a diesel, 4 tons, couple of brakes on a petrol. And that's kind of where we're at. There's no way I can see to change that. And I think in terms of these forum things, it's like what you often get is the question will be posed, what's the maximum I can tow behind a series? Someone like me comes along who's read this stuff and says 500 kilos, 2 tons, etc. And people get funny about it, and they get quite shirty about it, and can get quite aggressive, because what they're really asking is, I want reassurance that I can tow a 3.5 ton overrun brakes trailer behind my Series 2 or whatever it is. You can't. There's no kind of get out that I can see. You often see on there things like, well, the Series 3 book says these weights, but the Series 2 book doesn't. Therefore, they don't apply. Well, that's just not logical. The Series 3 is a technically more advanced vehicle than a Series 2 or 2A. It cannot possibly be in a situation where the Series 2 2A, which had inferior brakes, inferior clutch, didn't have brake servos, etc., or didn't generally have brake servos, could tow more than a Series 3. That doesn't make sense. I certainly cannot imagine VOSA or the police would take that line at all. In any case, we've got early 69. I'd have to get the exact, I think it's April 69. We've got the workshop bulletin, which clearly states what those weights were. So again, I don't see the wiggle room there with that one. All I can really say is, we can put this information out there. There's a lot of contradictory stuff. There's a lot of. It doesn't help that you've got with Series 3s, recommended towing weight 2 tons was printed on the chassis plates. That doesn't help matters, because it implies that wasn't a hard and fast rule. Technically speaking, at the time it probably wasn't, but there's a big question. What does that refer to? Is that 2 tons on an unbraked trailer? I doubt it. Is it 2 tons absolute maximum? Probably not, because again, the manuals were saying 3.5 or 4 tons with a couple of brakes. I would say the 2 tons recommended is referring to overrun brakes, which is what most people are going to encounter on a normal basis using a normal vehicle in normal service. So I think that's what it's referring to. We've got VIN plates, which people are clearly misunderstanding what a VIN plate is saying. The VIN plates are saying quite correctly this vehicle can tow 4 tons. You go to your manual. Okay, how does the braking law break down, or the braking requirements by the manufacturer break down? Because we've got the different sets of law. Like I said before, you've got the law allows an absolute maximum 750 kilos on an unbraked trailer. Virtually everything will then have a manufacturer's limit. So Land Rover at the time were saying, well, our maximum limit is 500 kilos for an unbraked trailer. And I think that's pretty much where it starts. You've got also, of course, check your licensing. I, for example, even though I have a Defender for which I could fit couple brakes on it, etc., I cannot legally tow beyond 3.5 tons because of the stipulations on my license, because I'm fairly young. So from when I pass my test, that is all I'm limited to. That will vary. Different people have got different rules. Unfortunately, this is very, very complicated stuff where you've got different laws in place, and you've got, people are going on one set and not the other. I mean, commonly, we see again on these forums, well, VIN plate says blah blah blah. Again, it's not being understood exactly what that is saying. And the unbraked trailer one, that's flagged up quite a lot, that people have 750 kilos on unbraked trailer. I mean, A-frames is another one, because there's a grey area about recovery, because recovery isn't towing in law. So, as far as I can establish, it isn't. But A-frames, if you're using it for recovery, it kind of comes under one set. If you're A-framing another vehicle to a show behind your, say you own 2 Land Rovers, so you're A-framing the one, that in law then becomes a trailer. So you've got the weight question. You've got brakes, because obviously it doesn't have overrun brakes. So technically speaking, it's a potentially 1800, 1900 kilo, if you've got some kit in there, unbraked trailer. So there's a lot of different things you've got to look into. I mean, all I can say is, the advice I can give it, just look at the manuals, look at the books, look at the stuff that's on forums, that people who have spoken to the police, who have spoken to VOSA. As I say, I will link to the comment, the discussion from VOSA, where they actually admit, they say the towing limits for Series Land Rovers are quite conservative. I think they were. I think Land Rover were covering themselves a bit, but it reflected the braking technology that was in existence at the time. We've then got them kind of saying, yeah, if a prosecution happened, this is the documentation we're going to go down. So all I can say is, I don't want to be that person, you don't want to be that person. So yeah, be careful as to what you do. I think it's just common sense. The smaller and lighter the trailer, the better. I mean, even having done quite a lot of towing with Defenders, I mean, 3.5 tons behind a Defender isn't a very pleasant experience. And that's on a vehicle with ABS, traction control, disc brakes, modern tyres, that's a brand new vehicle in immaculate condition. So there's certainly no way I would want to be even approaching that on a 40, 50 year old series truck, potentially even 60-year-old series vehicle, even if it was in very, very good condition. So it's just a case of sort of application of common sense, really, because I've seen instances where towing has gone wrong with modern vehicles, and it's very, very nasty, very, very unpleasant. And in this day and age, gone are the days of it'll be all right, mate. The police are hot on this stuff. VOSA is hot on this stuff. The health and safety executive is hot on this stuff. And as I said earlier on, the onus is on you. You as the driver are responsible, and you can't. Ignorance is no defence in law. You can't simply say, "Well, I didn't know." I mean, you've got as well, of course, the interpretation of the individual VOSA operative, or DVSA, I should say, as they are now. It's difficult to get a definitive answer as to what they think. Each individual one might have a slightly different interpretation. There might be some out there who'd say, I'd be happy with 3.5 tons on an overrun trailer behind a Series Land Rover. I can't say they don't exist. Certainly the email communication that's come from them is that they're going to go on the handbook limits as appropriate for the vehicle. So that would seem to be the case. And I think, again, it's going to be a case of chance, really. Are they going to pull you over driving steadily down the road with a heavy trailer on? Who knows? They might not. I think in the event of an accident, I think they're going to be very interested. Certainly, it's. I can only think of one instance actually of a Series Land Rover that was involved in an accident with a potentially overloaded trailer, and the last I heard was that the trailer and its contents had been taken to a weighbridge for analysis, but that was kind of the end of the discussion. So I don't know what the outcome was. Ultimately, I don't want it to be me. I don't think you want it to be. I don't think you want it to be you. So. You know, there's a lot of stuff to take in, and all that. So just have a look. I'll post links, as I say, to all the information that I can find with reference to this subject. But you know, I hope I'm not. I don't want to disappoint people, and some may well be, but I'm trying. You know, I'm trying to help everyone. Get the best out of the vehicles, but also stay safe and legal while they're doing it, because we're entering into an age where these things are looked at, they are monitored, they are, you know, the police and whatever, they are aware of this stuff, and we can complain all we like and say, you know, it's like speed cameras, it's, oh, you know, they're a reality of modern life. And they are what they are, unfortunately, and we've just got to deal with it. So I think it's important to just recognise there is documentation out there that gives quite conservative towing capacities for Series Land Rovers, and to keep in mind, if something goes wrong, they're going to Google that. The prosecution, whatever you want to call them, DVSA, prosecution, barrister, whatever it is, they're going to Google that. That's what they're going to look at when they're building their case against you. So if you've seen it and you comply with it, they've got a much weaker case against you. If you know, it's gonna make your life that bit easier. And I think as well, it's like let's try and move away from, you know, irrelevancies and things like drawbar pull. Drawbar pull's irrelevant for towing. That's connected to like ploughing. That's you know, how much force can a Land Rover exert on a Newton meter. It's got nothing to do with towing. Old photographs. Oh, here's a Land Rover pulling a bus. Yeah, back in the day, bus companies used Land Rovers to recover buses. One, recovery is not towing. Secondly, do they do it now? No, they don't. They've all got a big HGV 26 or 32 ton wrecker wagon, and they're doing a suspended tow recovering buses because things have moved on. There's the question, even back in the 60s, 70s, was what those companies were doing legal? I can't answer that. I don't know. And towing recovery is kind of off subject here. It may have been legal, it might not have been. Certainly they're not doing it now. And in any event, it's recovery. There are allowances in law for recovering a vehicle to a safe position. There'd be questions over things like distance and things like that in there, which are out of the scope of what I'm talking about. But hopefully I've cleared up a few points, particularly about VINs and about this myth that you know, Series 3 can somehow tow a load more than a 2.8. They can't. So I think there's that one. And it was just to reiterate, you know, what the actual limits are and where you can find them. I'll try and link to the workshop bulletin that lists the weights. But have a look in the manual. That's what they're going to be coming down to. They're going to look through the manuals, and they are online. And you'll see in the correspondence, the VOSA guy went and Googled it, and then he came back and he went, well, this is what I found, so this is what we're saying is going to be the case. So worth considering. And that's enough from me. I'm done now. I'm kind of jiggered trying to process all of this stuff, because it is very, very complicated, and I'm not surprised that people get very confused, but hopefully I've cleared up some of it, at least I hope. So thank you anyway. Bye bye.